Mergers and acquisitions and change management. What a subject. It's something that, clients over and over keep asking us, my team, about how to manage change in the middle of so many transformations, so many things going on at the same time. So here I have someone, Genevieve Dozier. She's an expert in so many things, and she has so much to share with you all about that. And we are going to start with this topic, which is something that is so, so important for you, my audience. And then I've been hearing in terms of questions that is coming from you. So, Genevieve, tell us about your experience in terms of M&As and managing and leading the change.
Sure. No, thank you, Camilla. So my first 10 years of my career, I was at one company and we were pretty consistently purchasing other companies. So when I think about M&A, just in a general sense, I think about which side of the acquisition are you on, right? And so when you think about you're at the company where you're buying other companies, that's typically the ideal side to be on, because majority of the time, right? Not always, majority of the time, and this was my experience, we just bought that company and then they, came into our own company, right? So we kind of swallowed them up. um,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
but then a few years later, I was at a different company and our company was purchased. And so again, kind of by a general definition, I felt like I was on the wrong side of the acquisition that time. And there was some hope, and I'll love to get into this more because there was like a glimmer of hope of like, okay, this might go well, and then it came crashing, it came crashing down, right? And so we can talk about what happened with that M&A and change management and kind of how it didn't work in my favor, although it seemed like it would, right? And then you kind of, have M&A where you think you're on the right side, right? You think it's a merger of equals, right? As an example, but then ultimately one company kind of wins out, right? And
Yes.
then that's shown during the change management of who ultimately, right, then becomes the leadership, right, of the combined companies and who's
Mm-hmm.
driving that change, management of the, two companies or even multiple companies, right? I've been in scenarios where one company purchased two different companies kind of back to back, and then it was all kind of then this conglomerate of bringing all, these multiple companies together. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
lots of different circumstances, lots of different ways things can go right or things can go wrong, certainly. And it is important how leadership, and how even, not just from a people leadership, but even from a peer leadership or leading up and leading down, right? And how you as a person, right, handle that change management, but then also how you can try to influence, how others handle the change management as well.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think independent on the side, and I have to agree too, that there is always a side that is not so good to be as opposed to the other side. There's always some sort of preference, right? But independent on that, how I feel at least, because I've been through one as well, Genevieve. And what I felt is like there was such a lack of transparency. The communication is so important, and the feelings, the concerns, the fears related to what was going on, either one side or another. It's so complicated because if people don't say anything, you just assume the worst. The worst is going to happen to me. The worst is going to happen to my department with my company. Anyway, right? So, I mean, even when we are in the side that is not so favorable, so good to be, on top of that, the lack of communication really complicates things and causes a lot of disengagement in the team, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, and it's interesting you say that because I think sometimes too, I've been in situations where I assume the best, right? Like you can assume the worst, or you can, and then it breaks my heart, right? Because it doesn't
Yes.
work out. So no, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Even irregardless of acquisitions, right? I mean, communication, transparent communication, that was something when I very first became a leader, a people leader, that I had not experienced. And so it was one of those things I took away from, leadership, where it's like things that I'm going to make sure I do versus like something they didn't do, was transparent communication. And so to your point, I wholeheartedly agree. It is imperative that your team will be more willing to embrace change if they feel like they are a part of it. And I think that's what the communication really drives, right? That connectivity, and
Mm-hmm.
not just being told information until the last minute, or not at all. And even it's the way you deliver the communication, right? If it's just a fleeting thought versus it's a very intentional, like, I brought the team together, I wanted to really, or you have one-on-ones, right? I really wanted to talk through this with you. Yeah, how are you feeling? Like, here's how I'm feeling, right? I've been really focused on being an empathetic leader. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's almost as important as, or it's also important as putting yourself right in your team's seat, right? How would you want to be involved and communicated to? And it's not just like, what are you getting from your leader? Because if you don't like how you're getting communicated to, then change it, right? Like, be the leader that you want to have, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and how are you feeling about the change as a leader, and communicating that, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
open, being vulnerable, authentic, can really ease the change with the team, so they don't feel alone.
Yes. Wow. And one thing that I loved that I heard from you right now, Genevieve, is the fact that if you don't like how they communicate with you, change it. Right. And many times, I mean, you may not even get all the information you need, and I normally say that the middle management is really the one that suffers the most. It's just I play is like this, grilled cheese effect, because you are in the middle being squeezed by your team, because like, I want information. What is going on? What's next? And you don't know many times because the top is not informing. And
Right.
then you are in that situation. But even though if you may not have all the information, as you said, you don't have to replicate what's happening with you. You just say, sometimes it's like, hey, people, I just don't know. I'll do my best to figure it out for you all. I
Yeah,
am being
absolutely.
honest with you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, even let them know you don't know, right?
Let them know you don't
And
know.
I think to your point too, like, I will try to find out, I'll do my best, right? And then they know that you're on their side, right? You're an advocate for them, and you're just not forgetting about them. I think that the thing we keep hearing in the industry is, making sure people are talking about you in a room that you're not in, right? And I think that's,
Hmm.
kind of letting them know that you're doing that, you're advocating for them on their behalf.
Absolutely. So we mentioned the merger, the M&A situation for you, and you also mentioned about, like in a new role. But tell me, I mean, independent of that, like, share with us a very impactful change you had in your career. What did you learn with it? And what advice would you have to the audience?
Yeah, well, I mean, just on the same theme that we're already on in regards to kind of leadership and change management, and learnings, I would say my most impactful change experience came, when my company, so it wasn't around M&A, but my division decided to do a reorg, right? And kind of change things up. I think a lot of it was driven because I wasn't in the know. I was in that kind of middle, right? I think though a lot of it was driven by, they had some talent and they wanted to see, like, hey, these are great individual contributors. Can they be leaders? People
Uh-huh.
leaders, right? Because a lot of companies define leadership by, you have people that report to you, and really that's not the definition of leadership, right? But in a lot of corporate roles, that's what it is. So the company did a reorg, and they said, hey, great news, we're going to promote you, and you're going to take on leadership of this newly formed team. So what they had done was they had a team of 8 people who did both sales support and client, like, strategic client account management, so like top client management. So they divided
Uh-huh.
those teams in two, so then one could just focus on the sales side of trying to help the sales team get the clients, and then the other could focus on keeping the clients, right? Just that account management. So it made a lot
Mm-hmm.
of sense. they put me in charge of the sales support team, because I had a lot of product knowledge and something, and I did appreciate this from the company, because something I had expressed interest in was I had a lot of product knowledge, but I didn't know a lot about the pricing
Mm-hmm.
component of our business. And that was something I wanted to learn. And so they said, okay, hey, get everything out of product into this team's head, from your head, and then they're going to help you learn pricing. So it was honestly a great, they did a great job with this reorg. I was really happy with it. But I did face some challenges. And so this newly formed team I had, their prior leader, they did a lot of, they just didn't have a great relationship with the sales team that they supported. It was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
just kind of workplace angst, if you will.
I
It was
understand.
just more
Mm-hmm.
frustration, like, oh my gosh, my salesperson's calling me again, right? And it's like that,
Mm-hmm.
wait, that's your job, right? Your job is to help them win the deal. So they did like technical product demos, they did special pricing proposals, like RFPs, things like that. And I came to find out that they would have a weekly, like Friday at 4 o'clock, they would all gather in a conference room and just basically just complain about the week, right? They would just all get in there and just complain. And I was like, this is not healthy at all, right? And so I changed it, and what we did instead was we had a Monday morning staff meeting, and I always hate like first thing in the morning meeting. So again, I kind of took what I didn't like from prior roles and I changed
Uh-huh.
it, and we did like a 10:30 to 12. And I
That's
made
good.
sure I gave each of them time on the agenda. So each of them could kind of, have a spotlight where they could
Share.
share from the
Mm-hmm.
week,
Mm-hmm.
right? Best practice that you learn from the week. A success story from, it could be just individual, like, hey, I, got something done, or I had this great call with a sales person. And it was get to know your salespeople, right? Tell me something personal about one of your salespeople. So it's like have real conversations, like get to know these folks. And then to our conversation already, I would bring things from my staff meeting, since now I was on the like the leadership team. So I would bring things like, here's what our numbers look like, right? Here's how important your role, here's why like this role is important, right? You're contributing to these numbers. Like here's our parts
Mm-hmm.
of our P&L that I could share with them. To your point, like some things I couldn't share, but some things I could, and what I could, I did. So it made them realize like how important they were and how important this role was to kind of meeting our numbers, what our goals were. We tracked to that. So again, it kind of put this visual versus like I'm just sitting here taking calls all day. So it really
Yes.
gave them some purpose. We created together, something I created was a team vision, and purpose. And then they had to create their own individual purpose, or write kind of their purpose statement. And I put it in like a pencil box. So we kind of created that together so they could have it on their desks, kind of a constant reminder. Um, and then something else I did, two things that I think were important with this change management, and again, kind of this, because I think you see this a lot. You see like team morale is down, like they don't understand, right? They're part of the bigger company,
Mm-hmm.
um, and who they work with. So something I did was they went on ride-alongs with the salespeople, because again, they only ever took calls like a call center, and so they went out into the field,
That is
they
so
went on
important.
client calls, they went to
Uh-huh.
meetings, they got to see, like, okay, now I understand why you call me, and you're like, I'm freaking out, I'm about to go in this meeting, I'm driving, right? And so that was one thing that was really valuable. And we did that annually. They would do different ride alongs with different team members. And then something else that I was able to do was we had an annual sales conference, and they had never been included before. And so I was
Oh.
able to get them
Uh-huh.
included. So they went, and again, this is their salespeople that they're supporting. That's their job, is to help them win. And so they got to see the salespeople, stand up and win awards for their sales, production. And they got to be in these dinners and these meetings, like have fun, like team building events. So they got to experience that in person, which is something they had never been able to do before. So again, they, really, really felt part of the team. They got to again see, kind of hear more from the salespeople of what that experience was. And it just really added to kind of that team morale.
That is so key. And you helped me to remind me when I was one time in sales for South America, and I had just the best relationship with the credit. we used to call the credit department, right?
For sure.
And we needed to increase credit limit to certain clients. And, they just had the vision of a credit, of course, because they were at the office, even though we had a very good relationship, which sometimes is hard, as you know. I mean, you see many companies, sometimes it's tense. It tends to be tense, right? Because one pushing to
Sure.
one side, another one to the other side, and no one has the big picture of either side. It's complicated, eh? You don't create this empathy. And
Right.
that happened to me. In fact, look how interesting. I started to travel and to take this lady that was working in credit, that was supporting me and my business to grow, to the main clients that she had issues and questions about if they would have the finance health to be able to pay the bills. That was really the concern, especially in an industry where the payment terms were very long. So she was afraid about all this increasing so much the exposure, right, with these clients. And we did it. And many things were very good. Well, first, I understood her side. She understood my side. Exactly what you're saying. And
Yeah.
another thing that I saw that was very positive is that sometimes clients will kind of, not play along, but somehow manipulate the conversation to one or to another. What they were able to see is a united team,
Sure.
credit and sales working together. We are one voice to you, client. You need to be one voice to us too. It's not the accounts to pay one kind of conversation and the procurement. No, no, no. We are just one. We want one from you. And that built alignment not only for us, but to the client. So it
Yeah.
was amazing. So I mean, I can 100% relate to that. And let me tell you, the sales conference, I never leave that. And I think is an amazing advice for them to be more part of it and take as an opportunity for team building, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, I love it.
Mhm.
Well, and if you think about things that don't go well when you're managing a change, either M&A or, any kind of situation that you've seen in your career, what did you see not going very well? Why? What are the learnings and what would you do different?
Okay, what would I do okay, yeah. No, it's a great one because there was one I think, what I referenced to earlier when you hope for the best. So I think advice, you mentioned that as a takeaway. I'm gonna start with that is what I did. Is I sought, mentorship right through the change. So this is
Uh-huh.
where my company was purchased, and there was a company that was purchased a few months later as well by the same company. And they had also just purchased a company. It was this crazy like unicorn of a situation. I mean, maybe not so crazy, but so ultimately, this one company purchased two companies, although the one had just purchased another. So technically three companies coming into one. And we
Mm-hmm.
all had the same division, right? That we supported so it was you know, kind of overlap, if you will.
Uh-huh. I see.
And so my company, I mean, my leader, he felt so strongly that we should take leadership of this division within kind of the newly formed
Uh-huh.
division out of all those acquired companies.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, we had a lot of meetings. I mean, there was so much so he flew me for a day trip, which this was, I think probably lots of people do it. It was the first time I had ever done it, but I flew, there and back same day. It was like an $800 flight. I was like, "Are you sure? For this like 2-3 hour meeting?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, do it." And he picked me up from the airport and he brought me back because he lived local to the area. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and after a period of time, we it was decided that one of the other acquired companies would take on leadership. And I
Mm.
remembered my leader specifically called me like late at night. I was at home and he's like telling me this. He's like, "I wanted to give you a heads up before you heard it from someone else." And he was a great leader, by the way. He was definitely one of my, when I think of my leaders over my 20-year career, he was one of my top. And he said, kind of, what do you want to do? Do you want to kind of stay with this, see how it plays? Because he was with the acquisition, he had been asked to go run a different part of the company. So
Oh,
that's what he
okay.
was doing. And so he
Uh-huh.
was, he said to me, hey, I think you should kind of, if you're seeking my advice, which I was, so that's kind of part of what I would, tell anyone in the situation is to seek advice from kind of a mentor, maybe someone more in the know than you potentially, right? As we were talking earlier.
Yeah.
He said, hey, stay with this, see how it plays out. He
Hmm.
was like, if for some reason things go south, I'm here. Like just wave the flag, right? He's like, but I think this could be a really good opportunity for you. Maybe you could kind of get even on the leadership team, right? Even though they granted kind of the overall leadership to a different kind, like maybe you get on the leadership team. And so
Hmm.
I was like, okay. I was like, I took his advice. I was like, let's roll the dice, right? Let's see how this plays out. Um, and so for probably about 6 months, I worked on kind of bringing all, four divisions together into one, days, nights, lots of flights. And we then, and I was told, like I had conversations where I was going to be on the executive team along with another woman that was from one of the other companies where she was the leader.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I negotiated a salary. I didn't have my title yet, but it was kind of like, here's the kind of different ways that I can contribute right on a leadership team. But I had my salary and I was told I was going to report to the head of division. So I was like, okay, this sounds great. And unbeknownst to me, one day, the newly formed company-wide email came out, the announcement kind of announcing this newly formed division, and here's the
Hmm.
leadership team, and I wasn't on it. Um,
Oh, and you were not informed before the email went out?
no, I wasn't.
Oh, that is
Nor the
bad.
other
Uh-huh.
woman that I referenced.
Okay.
And so I, of course, called the head of division, the person I negotiated that I was supposed to be reporting to, and he just simply stated, we decided to revert back to our original leadership team. So it was, the company that had been bought, they were head of division. They just decided to keep it as it was. And he just said, we decided to give you this other role over here, no team.
Okay.
You're going to be reporting to this other guy who reports to me. And so same thing. I was like, well, let's see how this plays out. And then pretty quickly it did not play out well. And I
Uh-huh.
called my former leader who I
Uh-huh.
trusted. And I said, I'm waving the flag. Like I need your help. And he moved me over to a role in his new division. Gosh, within like 2 days. So it
Huh.
was it was one of those. I feel in my 20-year career is a rare moment where someone actually did what they said they would do as far as kind of having my back in a difficult situation.
That is nice. Yeah.
And it's definitely one that, yeah, I'll always I'll always remember from that aspect, because a lot of people say they'll do things and then you go to them like, hey, I need your help, and then they're not there as I said they
They're
would. But
not
he
there.
he was. I mean, no, like no questions asked. As soon as I told him what happened, he pulled me back. And so that was kind of a bad experience turned to a good one.
Hmm. I think as leaders, sometimes we don't realize the impact that we can have on other people. Like, and I don't know if you had a chance to share with this leader, Genevieve, in terms of how wonderful, how you felt good, how you trusted this person, right? And how, I mean, how important, how good was that you decided to trust this person.
Right.
That's one of my comments. And the other one is actually a question. How did you feel when that email went out? Because I think I'll feel horrible, right? They didn't take a chance to talk to me about it, at least, and then people will come here and say, hey, where are you going? And what's going on? And you're like, I have no idea because no one talked to me, right? So how
Yeah.
did you feel?
Yeah, no, I think heartbroken. Because to your point, you do trust people, right? But
Hmm.
a lot of people talk about business. I mean, it is relationships, right? Similar to romantic relationships in a lot of different ways, right? Not some of the
Yes.
ways, but a lot of the feelings as far as to your point
Yes.
of trust. Like you can't just go around not trusting anyone, right? And so it's just trying to make strategic decisions, right? Listening to people, looking for red flags or green flags, right? And I had no reason kind of not to trust him. And I'm of the mindset, and I know some people are opposite of this, but I'm of the mindset of like I'll trust you if I get good vibes from you, like until you give me a reason not to, you know, and that's
Uh-huh.
just who I am. And so no, when I saw that email, I mean, I think it was shock, right? I mean, it was devastation. You know, probably shock first, right? Maybe this isn't right, right? Like maybe they sent out the wrong version of the
Made a
email.
mistake.
And so
Yes.
it was more
Uh-huh.
kind of questioning. And then when I called him, and just the fact to your point that I had to call him, right, to ask about, hey, I saw this email and my name wasn't on it, and then he confirmed, like, yeah, we just changed our minds. You know, and then of course I did. I said, like, well, why didn't you let me know ahead of time? Because some of my colleagues who saw the email were reaching out to me like, hey, why are you on this email? Right? Like, what happened? I thought this was
Uh-huh.
what was going to happen. And you know, me too, right? And so yeah, and so then I think it took me a minute for kind of the dust to settle for me to actually like comprehend what was even happening. And so I think I wrote down lots of questions for this new guy I was supposed to report to, trying to understand what happened. And so yeah, I think it just lots of questions, and then you know, trying to be hopeful again, like, okay, like let's roll with it. Like I can't do it, you know, what can you do about it, right? I think that's been a clear theme, I think, in change, excuse me, in change management of what's in your control and what's not in your control, right? I couldn't control that
Yes.
situation. And so
Exactly.
I just
Yes.
had to say, okay, I'm gonna talk to this new guy I'm supposed to report to you, see what he wants me to do. And then again, once it kind of went down that path of, you know, and luckily I had been in a situation previously in my career where I waited too long to get out of a not so great situation. And so this time, once I like started reporting to that new guy, and I was like, wait, this, I don't like this, right? Like, I don't like it. So I was quicker. What I learned from the prior stuff, I was quicker to get out.
Uh-huh.
Where I know that was something I had learned previously. And so I was proud of myself for kind of going down that road of change, right? Seeing what's going to happen, but then quickly identifying this is not where I want to be and getting
Mm-hmm.
out.
It's interesting you say that because I've been in situations that I also took too long to do something, to take action. And one of the reasons, to be very honest with you, was fear, right? It's really to not feel like that I should say anything about it or something bad will happen. And then you start thinking about the bills you have to pay in the end of the month, things like that, because it's really,
Yeah.
affects you as a, not a person, but as a, family member, as a parent.
Sure.
And there's so many things that can take place in this kind of situation, right? And I applaud you for learning with the fact that before you didn't say anything, you got there, you stayed there for longer, but then you learn and then you did something and was very successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I need to say that because you are an award winning in fintech, right? So I just need to mention to the audience, and you got, let me see, you've been recognized on the Women in Fintech Power List as a fintech inspired network builder. I love that. And I would like to ask you more about this. But before, I need to say that what I notice in you, in your story, is that this positive mindset, even in hard times, which is so hard for us to be some, to feel. And there is always this tendency to be negative in many situations. And you always try, I mean, as I could see it, most of the times try to take the best of it, and it's like I don't have the control, so still I need to make the best of it, and that is wonderful.
Yeah. No, a lot of things went into that growth, Camilla, to be honest. It wasn't always there. I think there were just things that happened where I finally, you know, I think there were times where my mental stress started affecting my physical health. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that. And so I took control. And I said, no longer, right? Am I going to let those, because to your point, right? What's finances if you don't have your physical health and your mental health? And it's so important.
Exactly.
And so I had for probably the last 10 years of my career, I have focused, not the first 10. That was what caused the stress that led to physical health issues and mental health issues. But the last 10 years, I have focused on self-care. I've focused on, take the PTO. I focused on make sure I'm there for my kids, make sure I'm not, if or I'm feeling burnout, that I do something to correct it. And I've set requirements, not expectations. That's been a big part of my journey, is like, oh, here's what I'd love to have in a role in a company and a leader. No, here's what I require. And to your
Mm,
point, that point where I mentioned kind of my mental health kind of, then translate into my physical health. And that's really where I took control of that thought of fear, to your point. And instead of thinking kind of what if, right? Like, what if I did this? What would and I flipped the narrative to why not, right? Like, why not just do this and see what happens? And then it turned into kind of, what's the worst that can happen? I lose my job. Okay, well, what are the different levers I can pull, right? Financially, to your point. Okay, well, it'll probably be okay, right? Like, and there's always that ultimate fear of like, what if it's not? But I think I'd just go down the road of kind of, your life's too short, and your mental health and your physical health are more important. So
yes,
from my
absolutely.
from my perspective, yeah.
No, and I'm with you. Yes. And when I look back, I see, oh, I could have done this and that. But in the end, at the end of the day, I am who I am right now because all the learnings that I
Of
had.
course.
So yes,
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that. And yes, I change and I'm in a different situation right now. And I take things and I take action in a different way. And that's very well. By the way, I love change management. That's my business. So yes, changing and always evaluating better ways to do and how to do it in an efficient way, in an excellent way. That's really where I'm going towards. So
Yeah.
yes, that's amazing. And if you think about resistance, Genevieve, anything comes to your mind in situations that you manage resistance, how you dealt with that, or if you were the resistant person, which I don't think you were because you're very positive. But anyway, how do you manage resistance in teams?
Yeah, so I mean, to your point, right? I mean, I have been more vocal in the latter part of my career, where kind of early on it was, I was even told, right? Just sit down, keep your head down, do a good job, right? Don't speak up in meetings. Where now, again, with confidence growth, that's not me anymore. I mean, I'm still very strategic in how I voice my opinion, and that it is, solution based, and I feel like it's necessary. But when you think about resistance, I think about a couple of different things with change in organizations, right? What is the change? Does it go against ultimately your values, your ethics, your morals? Because I think at the end of the day, when there's a conflict with what your company is trying to do and what your body is okay with doing, then that plays a big role in, are you okay with this resistance and staying on board, or is it something I can't get on board with and I need to exit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Seeking out a mentor, as I kind of mentioned before, when you're feeling potential resistance, or maybe your team is, right? So seeking a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
again, maybe someone with a bit more information, maybe a bit more, experience, that you can kind of, seek advice from. Not necessarily you have to take it, but it's great to kind of hear others' advice. Um, and trying to get all the information around the change, like, that's been a constant theme. I think communication, right? Why is this happening, right? What exactly is happening? How is it going to happen? When is it going to happen, right? These core things. And then having conversations with your peers, I think, to get their perspectives, because you might be looking at something one way, to your point, kind of a positive mindset, but then someone might be looking at it a different way. So I think it's good to get
Mm-hmm.
that kind of holistic views, or just get to other people's perspectives. And then I like to think about resistance of, make a goal. And again, kind of going back to, is this something I want to be a part of? Yes. And then how am I going to help, move forward, move my team forward? Or is this something I'm gonna, maybe stay on board for 6 months, 12 months, see how it plays out, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
kind of have your time mark for, okay, now I'm gonna try to make an exit, and then how am I gonna try to make an exit? I think that's really important. And when you talk about kind of network building, right, it's then reaching out to your network, right, to do that, because I think a lot of people haven't built networks outside of their company when something does happen at their company that, maybe they're not comfortable with, or they find themselves in a redundancy situation where they're potentially let go, right? Because, hey, we already have this division doing these things. We
Yes.
don't need your
Mm-hmm.
role anymore, right? So it's so important to have those connections outside of your company,
Yes.
for when certain things do happen.
I like what you say, and I can see that very few people take time and energy to really invest in some, networking groups.
Yeah,
I guess because it's busy and, other priorities, yes, it's fine. But what I've seen is in some networking groups is that a lot of people start working or looking for it when they are retiring, yeah, and they're
hmm
looking for something else to do.
yeah,
Yes, I see that. And also when they there were layoffs and they were one of those that, left the company. So yeah, it's basically more a reactive instead of proactive approach. And
right.
that, and I think it's extremely valuable to be there and keep connected. And yes, it takes time and energy a lot. Even your current network, if you think about LinkedIn, for instance, like, how many connections you have, but are they really connections or
Right.
just one number there? So
Yeah.
have you been proactive trying to reach out to some of them to say, hey, what's up, what you're doing, what's your, things like that, and really connect? And I think it's a very, very good advice.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
All right, so now wrapping up with our last question. Genevieve, tell me, if you could summarize in a few words your success, what would you say?
Um, I would say to focus on internal happiness. That has been my guiding light, again, kind of for the last 10 years. What I've learned is that external success is fleeting, but truly feeling happy is fulfilling. And that's where I really define success. And yeah, you can define success in lots of different ways, but just throughout my career, like you said, different awards, different titles, different roles. But at the end of the day, I have to like ask myself, right, am I happy? Am I truly happy? And I did this exercise one time for this leadership. It was like a week-long leadership event that I attended. And they asked you to do kind of this visualization
Uh-huh.
exercise where you're retired, to your point earlier, and
Okay.
where are you at? Where do you picture yourself? And what are you looking back on as kind of your legacy? And it was a really powerful exercise because it forces you to really look back, almost like a post-mortem, right? Like looking back on your life, like what do you want to be proud of, or what would you be proud of that you had done? And so I think what that does is it forces you to think about like what's really important. And was it the particular title? Was it the particular award? Was it that particular role? And only each person can answer those questions. But that really has my guiding light of like if I'm on that porch of the beach house, like listening to the waves crash, what am I sitting there smiling, thinking about? Right. And it's probably more so the time that I took with my kids, right, and
Yeah.
my family, certain people, to your point, that I did network with and created friendships and have helped them, and they mutually have helped me. So I think that's been a core part of my success, honestly, is looking back on the people that I've helped, as a result of me being in a specific role. It's not necessarily the role or the title, it's certainly not the money. And so that's how I would, you know, that was probably more than a few words, but that I would again focus on internal happiness would be my secret to success.
Yes, I love it. I feel like when we are in the middle of things, when we are managing our routine and all, we don't stop and realize what really matters. And this exercise that you just said, I think exemplifies really this understanding about, okay, what's important for me truly, and just thinking that you want to be proud and you want to be happy with this journey when you look back and see the moments that really matter the most. Yeah, it's I think it's very powerful, and we should do that more often, huh?
Yes,
Especially like in the beginning of the year, when you say, okay, what did I do, that when you do the new year resolution, when you think, okay, but not only thinking ahead but also thinking back, like, oh, what did I do that I'm really proud of, what did I do that, oh, I didn't like, and maybe it was a mistake, but then what did I learn with that? So
sure.
things like that, I think is helpful, and these exercises maybe I'll do even once a year.
Yeah.
Yes, well, Genevieve, thank you so much for your time today. I do appreciate all your wisdom, and I'm pretty sure the audience will take a lot of benefits from from this conversation today. Well, and I'll see you soon in our next episode of Shift Happens podcast. Thank you all. Bye bye.